Hello to everyone and the internet. It is currently Woden's Day, January 23rd. I am Nathan of Washington, and you are watching The Young Globalist, and this is the news in 2019. Alright everybody, so Syria has had enough of Israel's crap and now plans to retake lost territory and may even attack the Tel Aviv airport. Because you know, the Israelis unjustly attacked the airport in Damascus, claiming that there was an Iranian presence there, but you know the real reason, that was just an excuse. They just wanted to attack Syria because they hate Syria. But let me tell you something. If you got President Nate, here's what President Nate would give you. You would get severely reduced government spending to the point of only spending on necessity. I would trim the fat, especially military spending in particular. You would get criminal justice reform bills emphasizing no victim, no crime. You know, things would get a lot more civilized and be more equal justice. And ending the U.S. support of Israel until it ends its criminal behavior. Because I think the way Israel's been behaving lately, I think we should just wash our hands of it. They've been absolutely disgusting and borderline criminal in their behavior. Not borderline, literally criminal. And I think we should just wash our hands of it. Like, nope, Israel, you're going to act like this? We're not helping you. We are not aiding a criminal state. But Syria and their ally Russia will now make moves to retake the Golan Heights, which was taken during the Six-Day War of 1967, which Syria cites as a critical piece of territory. They also plan to strike at Israel for hitting Syrian targets that are alleged to be Iranian, but are not. As I said before, the airport in Damascus was wrongfully targeted. They deflected the attack by positioning rocket launchers, automated rocket launchers in the region, and so forth. So, yeah. So it's not like Israel's picking on Syria means that Syria can't defend themselves. They most certainly can. It's just kind of a chore. But this is only if the UN does not enact measures to prevent Israel from making more violent moves into Syrian territory. Like, if the UN does not enact measures against Israel, then Syria will retaliate. So if they don't want war in the Middle East, then they need to sanction or do something to Israel to prevent it from happening. And as I said before, the U.S. should just wash its hands of Israel's behavior and end support until they change the way they act. I think that's how it should happen. I just hope that Syria and Russia don't end up crossing like a major moral line and it becoming worse than Israel, or even very much the same. Like they don't take it too far, only doing what is appropriate and not like becoming excessive in its response. But I can only hope. Merkel and Macron continue to ignore the will of the people, and they've created a new pact. It's called the Aachen Treaty. Aachen, I think, Aachen Treaty, and how it reinforces the relationship of France and Germany, essentially creating sort of an axis between the two. And of course, the Yellow Vests and some other groups protested, which went completely ignored by both world leaders, of course. And while descendant of Europeans, Americans wanted to keep certain aspects of European culture, but not its politics, which are historically oppressive. So like, even now, as corrupt as our government's become, you never see shit like this. We created an entirely new class of politics to try and get away from this very thing. And while I don't want to sound like a self-important American, I think that we all taught you a darn good lesson about respecting other people's freedoms. Now, you should have taken up some of our ideas. Not all, but there's certainly some. But anyway, Macron goes out and actually compares those who do not support the treaty, saying that they're accomplices to the crimes of Germany against France in World War II. Whoa, Emmanuel. That's a bit too far, don't you think? It hardly amounts to a literal invasion and suppression of people. Yeah, this Macron has quite the mouth on him. He's good calling people who don't approve of him thugs and criminals and so forth. I think this is just more of that little attitude problem of his. Man, if he wasn't a politician and I was a little more violent, I'd probably pop him in the mouth to change his attitude. But I won't. But given circumstances, I probably would. You need some kind of attitude change, that's for sure. There's just no comparison there. That is, man, that is beyond rude. The word rude doesn't quite cover what that is. But even the EU itself has voiced concerns over the treaty, as it may serve to place France and Germany at the top of the pecking order, essentially. But of course, they dismiss these concerns. The two basically say that this will strengthen European unity by strengthening theirs. Well, that's what they're afraid of. If you guys have stronger unity than the rest of them, that would make you stronger and more important than the rest of the EU. And while I find the EU to be completely despotic, I don't think their fears are completely inaccurate. More cooperation would make France and Germany quite prominent within the EU, and they might even end up moving the capital of the EU, from Brussels to either Paris or Berlin, or maybe even somewhere on the border. So I mean, they become extremely important, which is probably what they want. No, I don't think that the Treaty of Aachen is really about establishing peace. I think this is a move by Macron and Merkel to increase Germany and France's power within the EU, to become more important, have more influence. Because that's what politicians do. That's what they want. They want power and they want influence. It's the same old bullshit. Always has been, always will be. This is just a move for personal power. Plain and simple. This is what politicians have wanted since the day politicians existed. Go figure. The Queen has had enough and is now trying to stop any traitorous British politicians, her words, not mine, from stopping Brexit by refusing royal assent to any bills that keep the British in the EU. Now, apparently, bills proposed by Parliament, they do require the Queen to consent to them to some extent. Royal assent. So the Queen is not, strictly speaking, a figurehead. In many ways, the British Parliament is not totally unlike the American Congress, which means, in essence, the Queen is like a less powerful version of the President, and the Congress and the Parliament is a more powerful version of the Congress. They have a similar relationship, and she still has to give the okay, and she traditionally has okayed most of their proposals. But any proposal that keeps the Britain in the EU, apparently, she's going to say no to. And it's going to have a hard time getting anywhere. The Queen apparently wants Brexit. The Queen always seems to have the will of the people at heart, whereas the Parliament clearly does not. Now, I'm not sure why the British government would want Brexit so bad, aside from the fact that the EU is clearly growing even more despotic, and the fact that the British government keeps growing more and more despotic day by day. Yeah, I'm starting to remember why our founding fathers here in the United States decided to break away from Britain and say bye-bye to traditional European politics. Because look where it's got you. We changed. We learned. You didn't. And now look where it's got you. I mean, you picked up some of our ideas. You picked up democracy, and the Queen gave a nice little speech about democracy. Democracy and a monarchy, huh? Well, yeah. Looks like you guys pretty much made it work. The problem is not the system here, surprisingly enough, though. The problem is who's in charge. What made European politics rotten for so long was not just the systems. The systems were only part of the problem. The remaining problem was who you put in charge of it. The kinds of figures that normally gain power in your various European systems of politics are usually very despotic individuals. Over here, our problem is not so much despotism as it is just corrupt politicians who pretend to have the people's best interests at heart, and sometimes they do, but most of the time they just want whatever makes them more powerful. The people can get whatever they want, just so long as they get what they want too. Sort of a compromise despotism, in essence. It's a little bit better, but still pretty bad. Bottom line is, I'm totally with the Queen here. You guys should leave the EU. And she's totally in the right to refuse any bills that keep you within it. And for our final story today, John Kerry slams Trump, says he doesn't take his position as president very seriously. No, I disagree. Trump takes his position very seriously. It's that John Kerry and politicians like him don't understand Trump. Because he's not a typical politician. He's sort of a reality TV star kind of guy. He's very loud, abrasive. Basically what happens when you give a New York bully money and power, essentially. He's still a New York bully, he's just a rich New York bully. And that's not how most politicians tend to behave. No, he takes his position seriously. He's saying this mostly just because he doesn't like Trump's energy proposals, calling them dangerous, or talking about how he treats Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, well, you know how Trump treats Nancy Pelosi. You should see how Nancy Pelosi treats Trump. She should be grateful he doesn't treat her even worse. Or better yet, be grateful that he doesn't treat her the way she treats him. You want to talk about who the real bully is, it's basically Nancy Pelosi and her first grade schoolgirl level negotiation tactics, which are shallow as all hell, and she's even been guilted about and reprimanded many times. Bottom line is, Trump takes his position very seriously. And John Kerry, like so many, just doesn't understand Trump. I can understand him a little bit, kind of. I mean, some of Trump's ideas, like... But I think he engineered this whole government shutdown thing. Or at least me and my brother were talking about how he might have engineered this deliberately as part of his one campaign promises to drain the swamp. He's trying to get people to hate the Democrats that are against him, so that we'll want them removed. And if that's true, then Trump is what I've always said he was, a 4D chess player. If so, I'm afraid I'm only a 3D chess player, and therefore I don't fully understand the depth of his schemes. I think Trump is very intelligent. More intelligent than he lets on. Which I would totally understand that, because that's something I do as well. Anyway, bottom line is, I have not seen many of Trump's energy proposals. I believe he still supports like the introduction of like coal mining. Now, mind you, I live in what was essentially a former logging town, which has resulted on coal-powered electricity for a long time, and we're currently in the process of transitioning to safer energy forms. I think there's a strong possibility that that might be the one claim that John Kerry has that might be legitimate. I've seen a couple of Trump's energy proposals, and they kind of left me scratching my head like, I'm not saying he's going to be fully competent. He has plenty of advisors, telling him what he should do, which is always a good idea. But I just don't think John Kerry fully understands Trump. Neither the depth of his schemes, nor how his character really works. His actions speak far louder than his words. Anyway, that's it for the Young Globalist today, folks. I'm out.